Before we exchange our vows, Ethan's voice echoed through the chapel, his hands gripping his wheelchair's armrests. There's something I need to confess. The crowd of wedding guests fell silent. Emma's heart stopped as she watched her soon-to-be husband take a deep breath, tears forming in his eyes. I've been living a lie, he continued, his voice shaking. This wheelchair, my disability, none of it is real. I've been pretending all along. The chapel erupted in gasps as Ethan slowly rose from his wheelchair. Emma's bouquet slipped from her trembling fingers, white roses scattering across the altar steps like broken promises. Emma, please. Ethan reached for her, standing perfectly straight. Let me explain. But Emma had already turned and fled down the aisle, her wedding dress billowing behind her like a ghost of what could have been. As we continue this story, make sure to subscribe to our channel and drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from. If you're already subscribed, thank you. We truly appreciate your support. Now, let's get into the story. The autumn breeze rustled through the maple trees outside the Grand Plaza Hotel as Emma Tucker adjusted her name tag one last time. Another charity event, another evening of small talk and forced smiles. As the event coordinator for the Children's Hope Foundation, she should have been used to these gatherings by now, but something felt different tonight. Emma! There you are! Sarah, her assistant, rushed toward her with a clipboard clutched to her chest. The silent auction items aren't properly labeled, and Mrs. Henderson is throwing a fit about the seating arrangement. Emma sighed, tucking a strand of auburn hair behind her ear. When isn't she throwing a fit? I'll handle it. As she made her way through the growing crowd of designer dresses and tuxedos, Emma noticed a commotion near the entrance. A young man in a wheelchair was struggling with the heavy door. Without hesitation, she changed course. Let me help you with that, Emma said, holding the door open. When he looked up, their eyes met and something electric passed between them. His warm brown eyes crinkled at the corners as he smiled. Thank you, he said, his voice surprisingly deep and melodious. I'm Ethan Parker. Emma Tucker, she replied, finding herself unable to look away. Are you here for the auction? Actually, I'm one of the benefactors, he said with a slight shrug. My tech company has been doing well, and I believe in giving back. A loud crash from the auction area broke their connection. Oh no, Emma groaned. I'm sorry, I have to. Go save the day? Ethan finished, his eyes twinkling. Maybe we could continue this conversation later? I'll be the guy trying not to run over anyone's toes. Emma laughed despite herself. I'd like that. Throughout the evening, Emma found her eyes constantly drawn to Ethan. He moved through the crowd with surprising grace, chatting and laughing with various guests. There was something about him, a gentle spirit that seemed to draw people in. Girl, who are you staring at? Sarah appeared at her elbow with 2 glasses of champagne. Following Emma's gaze, she raised an eyebrow. The guy in the wheelchair? Really, Em? Don't start, Emma warned, accepting the champagne. He's interesting and kind and funny. And disabled, Sarah pointed out. Look, I'm not being prejudiced, but you need to think practically. You've always wanted kids, a normal life. Normal? Emma cut her off, suddenly angry. What's normal, Sarah? Being miserable with some perfect guy who treats me like arm candy? Before Sarah could respond, Ethan wheeled over. Sorry to interrupt, but I believe you promised me a conversation, Emma Tucker. Emma smiled, handing her untouched champagne to a surprised Sarah. That I did, Ethan Parker. They spent the rest of the evening in a corner of the ballroom, talking about everything and nothing. Ethan told her about his passion for developing adaptive technology, and Emma shared stories about the children she helped through the foundation. Time seemed to slip away until Sarah reluctantly informed them the event was ending. As Emma watched the valets help Ethan into his specially equipped car, he called out, Would you like to have coffee sometime? Her heart fluttered. I'd love to. Sarah appeared beside her as Ethan's car pulled away. Em, are you sure about this? Emma watched the taillights disappear into the night, a smile playing on her lips. No, she admitted, but I'm sure about him. Little did she know that this chance encounter would lead her down a path that would challenge everything she thought she knew about love, trust, and what it means to truly see someone for who they are. That first coffee date turned into dinner, which led to movie nights, long phone calls, and stolen moments between Emma's hectic charity events and Ethan's busy schedule at his tech company. Before either of them realized it, autumn had melted into winter, and their lives had become beautifully intertwined. "You're different lately," Emma's mother remarked one Sunday during their weekly family dinner. "You're practically glowing." Emma stirred her soup, trying to hide her smile. "I met someone, Mom." Her father looked up from his roast beef. "About time. Who's the lucky fellow?" "His name is Ethan Parker. He runs a successful tech company that develops adaptive technology for people with disabilities." Emma took a deep breath. "And he uses a wheelchair." The clatter of her mother's spoon against the bowl echoed through the sudden silence. "Oh, honey," her mother finally said, reaching across the table to pat Emma's hand. "Are you sure about this? Taking care of someone like that, it's a huge responsibility." "I'm not taking care of him, Mom. He takes care of himself just fine. We're dating, not doing physical therapy." Her father cleared his throat. "Emma, sweetheart, your mother has a point. Have you really thought this through? What about children? What about—" "I'm not having this conversation." Emma pushed back from the table. "Ethan is brilliant, kind, and he makes me happier than I've ever been. That's all that should matter." Later that evening, as she sat in Ethan's cozy apartment watching him prepare tea with practiced ease, she couldn't help but smile at how wrong her parents were. "Penny for your thoughts?" Ethan wheeled over, carefully balancing two steaming mugs. "Just thinking about how lucky I am," she said, accepting the tea. "My parents don't understand us, but they don't need to. This," she gestured between them, "is all that matters." Ethan's face softened. "Emma Tucker, you are extraordinary." He reached for her hand, his touch sending warmth through her entire body. "But I need to know, are you sure about us? About me? Your life would be easier with—" She silenced him with a kiss. "My life would be empty without you." Their relationship deepened over the next few months, despite the whispers and stares they encountered. Sarah gradually came around, especially after seeing them together at the Foundation's spring gala. "Okay, I was wrong," Sarah admitted, watching Ethan charm a group of donors. "You two are kind of perfect together." Emma beamed. "He is perfect. Sometimes I think this is all a dream." But not everyone was as accepting. One evening at a restaurant, Emma overheard a couple at the next table whispering, "Poor thing, she must be desperate, or maybe it's his money." Before Emma could react, Ethan squeezed her hand. "Hey, look at me," he said softly. "Their words can't touch us unless we let them." That night, as they sat in his car outside her apartment, Ethan turned to her with an unusually serious expression. "Emma, these past 6 months have been the happiest of my life. I never thought I'd find someone like you, someone who sees me, not my wheelchair." He pulled out a small velvet box. "I know it's fast, but when you know, you know. Will you marry me?" Emma's heart soared as tears filled her eyes. "Yes," she whispered. 1,000 times yes." As they held each other, celebrating their engagement, neither could have predicted the storm that was brewing, a truth that would test their love in ways they never imagined. For behind Ethan's gentle smile lay a secret that would shake their world to its core. But for now, in this perfect moment, there was only love, hope, and the promise of forever. Wedding planning consumed the next few months of Emma and Ethan's life. The Grand Plaza Hotel, where they first met, would host their ceremony. Emma threw herself into the details: flowers, cake tastings, seating arrangements, while Ethan seemed increasingly distant. Earth to Ethan, Emma waved her hand in front of his face during a meeting with their wedding planner, Lisa. "Which centerpiece do you prefer?" "Oh, whatever you think is best, love." He fidgeted with his wheelchair's armrest, a habit Emma had noticed becoming more frequent. Later that evening, in Ethan's apartment, Emma couldn't shake her concern. "Is everything okay? You've been different lately." Ethan wheeled to the window, his back to her. "Just stressed about work," he said, but his voice held an edge she'd never heard before. "The company's launching a new project." "Are you sure that's all?" Emma moved to stand beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You know you can tell me anything, right?" He covered her hand with his, but didn't meet her eyes. "I know." The weeks flew by, filled with dress fittings and rehearsal dinners. Emma's mother had finally warmed to Ethan, especially after he offered to pay for the entire wedding. "He's really quite remarkable," her mother admitted during Emma's final dress fitting. "The way he's built his company, his generosity. I was wrong about him, dear." Emma smiled at her reflection in the mirror. the white gown making her feel like a princess. He's everything to me, Mom. But there were moments when doubt crept in, not about their love, but about Ethan's behavior. He would take mysterious phone calls, ending them abruptly when she entered the room. Sometimes she caught him staring at her with an expression that looked almost like guilt. Sarah noticed too. "He's not getting cold feet, is he?" she asked one day over lunch. "No, it's not that," Emma defended, but uncertainty colored her voice. "He's just, I don't know. Sometimes I feel like he's carrying this huge weight, but he won't share it with me." The night before their wedding, during the rehearsal dinner, Emma watched Ethan interact with their guests. He seemed on edge, especially when her cousin Mike, a physical therapist, tried to engage him in conversation about his condition. "I'd rather not discuss it," Ethan said curtly, wheeling away. That night, unable to sleep, Emma called him, breaking their agreement to spend the night before the wedding apart. "I love you," she said softly into the phone. "Whatever's bothering you, whatever's going on, we can face it together." There was a long pause before Ethan responded, his voice thick with emotion. "I love you too, Emma, more than you could ever know. That's why." He stopped abruptly. "Never mind. Get some sleep, beautiful. Tomorrow's our big day." As Emma lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, she couldn't shake the feeling that their perfect love story was about to face its greatest test. What she didn't know was that in his own bedroom across town, Ethan was wide awake too, wrestling with a decision that would either destroy their relationship or prove the depth of their love once and for all. The truth he had buried beneath months of deception was clawing its way to the surface, demanding to be heard. Tomorrow, at the altar, everything would change. The only question was, would their love be strong enough to survive it? The morning of the wedding dawned crisp and clear, sunlight streaming through the windows of Emma's bridal suite at the Grand Plaza Hotel. Her hands trembled slightly as Sarah helped her into her wedding dress, the ivory silk rustling softly. "Something borrowed," her mother said, fastening her grandmother's pearl necklace around Emma's neck. "Something blue," Sarah added, sliding a delicate sapphire bracelet onto her wrist. Emma stared at her reflection, her heart racing. "Has anyone heard from Ethan this morning?" Sarah and her mother exchanged glances. "His best man says he's here," Sarah said carefully. "But he's been quiet." A knock at the door interrupted them. It was Lisa, the wedding planner, looking flustered. "Emma, we have a small situation. Ethan's insisting on a change to the ceremony." "What kind of change?" Emma's stomach tightened. "He wants to say his own vows before yours, and he's rather adamant about it." Emma frowned. They had agreed to use traditional vows. What was he planning? Before she could probe further, the wedding march began playing faintly from the chapel below. "It's time," her father said from the doorway, looking dashing in his tuxedo. The walk down the grand staircase felt surreal. Guests turned to watch her descent, their faces a blur of smiles and tears. But Emma's eyes were fixed on Ethan, waiting at the altar in his wheelchair. He looked pale, his knuckles white where they gripped the armrests. As she reached the altar, something felt off. Ethan wouldn't meet her eyes, and there was a tension in his shoulders she'd never seen before. The minister began speaking, his words about love and commitment echoing through the ornate chapel. "Before we proceed with the traditional vows," the minister announced, "the groom has requested to speak." Emma's heart stopped as Ethan finally looked up at her. His eyes were filled with tears. "Emma?" His voice cracked. "Before we go any further, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you the day we met." A murmur rippled through the guests. Emma's father half rose from his seat, but her mother pulled him back down. "I've lived with this lie for too long," Ethan continued, his voice growing stronger. "I told myself it was to protect my heart, to find someone who could love me for who I am, not what I have. But in doing so, I've betrayed the very thing I was searching for. True love." Emma's world began to spin. "Ethan, what are you saying?" He gripped the armrests of his wheelchair. "The truth is," he paused, taking a deep breath. "The truth is, I'm not disabled. This wheelchair, my supposed condition, it's all been a lie." The chapel erupted in gasps and whispers. Emma staggered backward, her bouquet slipping from her fingers to scatter rose petals across the altar steps. Sarah rushed forward to steady her, but Emma shrugged her off. "I don't understand," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Why would you?" But before Ethan could respond, before he could explain the months of deception, Emma turned and fled down the aisle, her wedding dress billowing behind her like a white flag of surrender. The last thing she heard was Ethan calling her name, his voice filled with desperation and regret. Behind her, chaos erupted in the chapel. But Emma didn't stop running until she reached the hotel garden, collapsing onto a stone bench beneath a blooming cherry tree. The same bench where, just months ago, Ethan had first told her he loved her. Now, as petals rained down around her like tears, Emma wondered if anything about their love had been real at all. In the garden, time seemed to stand still. The distant sounds of chaos from the chapel barely registered as Emma tried to make sense of her world turning upside down. She heard footsteps approaching, but couldn't bring herself to look up. Emma? It was Sarah, carrying her friend's discarded bouquet. Your mother's holding off the guests, and your father, well, let's just say Ethan's lucky he's still in that wheelchair, fake or not. A hysterical laugh bubbled up in Emma's throat, quickly turning into a sob. I don't understand, Sarah. Was any of it real? Before Sarah could answer, another figure appeared, Ethan, walking steadily toward them. The wheelchair was gone, and his gait was perfect, confident. Emma's heart clenched at the sight. Please, he said, stopping a few feet away, let me explain. Sarah stepped between them protectively. I think you've done enough damage for one day. It's okay, Sarah, Emma said quietly, finally looking up at the man she thought she knew. I need to hear this. Sarah squeezed her shoulder before leaving them alone. The cherry blossoms continued to fall, a cruel reminder of more innocent times. I come from old money, Ethan began, his voice hollow. My whole life, people have only seen my wealth, my status. Every relationship felt hollow, calculated. I watched my brother go through 3 divorces with women who only wanted his money. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar, yet now somehow foreign. When I started the adaptive technology company, I saw how differently people treated those with disabilities. There was less artifice, more genuine connection. So you decided to lie? Emma's voice cracked. To everyone? To me? It started as a social experiment, he admitted. I wanted to see how people would treat me differently. But then I met you, and you were so genuine, so real. I fell in love with how you saw me, not as a wealthy man, not as someone to be pitied, but just as me. But it wasn't you. Emma stood up, anger finally breaking through her shock. Every time you struggled with a door, every time I worried about you overexerting yourself, every time I defended our relationship to my family, it was all based on a lie. The chair was a lie. Ethan stepped closer, his eyes pleading. But my love for you, my personality, my dreams for our future, that was all real. You fell in love with my heart, Emma, not my disability. Don't you dare, Emma backed away. Don't you dare try to twist this into some noble experiment in true love. You lied to me every single day for months. You let me fight with my family, question my choices, restructure my entire life around a facade. I wanted to tell you so many times, he reached for her hand, but she pulled away. The longer it went on, the harder it became. I knew I had to tell you before we got married, but I was terrified of losing you. Well, congratulations, Emma's voice was ice. You just did. She turned to leave, but Ethan called after her. Emma, please, remember what you said last night, that we could face anything together? She stopped, her back to him. That was before I knew the man I loved never existed. He does exist. Ethan's voice broke. Everything else about me is real. My company, my values, my love for you. The wheelchair was just the foundation of our entire relationship. Emma finished, finally turning to face him. In her wedding dress, surrounded by falling petals, she looked like a tragic heroine in a painting. You didn't trust me enough to love you for yourself, so you created a test. But in doing so, you proved yourself unworthy of that love. The truth of her words hung heavy in the air between them. In the distance, they could hear Lisa attempting to manage the confused and angry guests. Soon, they would have to face the chaos, the questions, the judgment. But for now, they stood frozen in their own private tragedy, surrounded by the beauty of a wedding day that had transformed from a celebration of love into a monument to betrayal. As Emma finally walked away, leaving Ethan alone in the garden, neither of them knew if their love could survive this shattered trust, or if it should. A week after the wedding, that wasn't, Emma sat in her apartment, surrounded by unopened wedding gifts and wilting flower arrangements. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages from well-meaning friends and family, but she couldn't bring herself to respond to any of them. "You need to eat something," Sarah said, placing a cup of tea and a sandwich beside her. "And maybe consider opening some of these gifts. The return window won't last forever." Emma stared at the teacup, remembering countless evenings spent sharing tea with Ethan. How do you move forward when everything you believed in turns out to be a lie? Was it, though? Sarah sat down beside her. "I've been thinking about it a lot. Yes, he lied about the wheelchair, and that's huge. But Emma, everything else about him, the way he looks at you, how he remembers every little detail about your life, how he always puts you first, that was real. But how can I trust anything now?" Emma's voice cracked. "He manipulated me from the very beginning." "Did he?" Sarah challenged gently. "Or did he just create circumstances where you could see his heart before his wealth?" Before Emma could respond, there was a knock at the door. Sarah opened it to find a delivery man holding a small package. Inside was a USB drive and a note in Ethan's handwriting. "The truth about who I am." With trembling hands, Emma plugged the drive into her laptop. It contained videos, hundreds of them. Security footage from his company showing him working late into the night on adaptive technology designs. News clips about his anonymous donations to disability organizations, dating back years before he met Emma. Interviews with his employees, many of whom had disabilities themselves, talking about how Ethan had changed their lives. The final video was from Ethan himself, recorded in his office. "Emma," his face filled the screen, tired and drawn. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. What I did was wrong, no matter my intentions. But I need you to understand. My passion for helping others, my dedication to making technology accessible, my love for you, none of that was fake. The wheelchair was a shield I hid behind because I was scared. Scared that my wealth would blind you to who I really am, just like it has with everyone else in my life." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so achingly familiar it made Emma's heart hurt. "I thought I was protecting myself, but instead, I hurt the one person who saw me clearly from the very beginning. The irony is, you probably would have loved me anyway, wheelchair or not, rich or poor. That's who you are, someone who looks past the surface to see the soul beneath." Tears streamed down Emma's face as the video continued. Sarah quietly slipped out, leaving her alone with her thoughts. Over the next few days, Emma immersed herself in the contents of the USB drive. She saw Ethan's work through new eyes, not just as a wealthy man's hobby, but as a genuine mission to make the world more accessible. She remembered all the moments they'd shared, all the conversations that had nothing to do with his supposed disability. One evening, as she walked through the city trying to clear her head, she found herself at the Grand Plaza Hotel. The same place where they'd first met, where he'd proposed, where their wedding had fallen apart. On impulse, she went inside and took the elevator to the rooftop garden. And there he was, standing at the railing, looking out over the city lights, as if he'd been waiting for her all along. "I knew you'd come here eventually," he said without turning around. "This is where our story began." Emma moved to stand beside him, keeping a careful distance. "I've been watching your videos. And I'm still angry," she said honestly, "but I'm also beginning to understand." He finally turned to look at her, his eyes filled with cautious hope. "Understanding isn't the same as forgiveness." "No," Emma agreed, "but maybe it's a start." The city lights twinkled below them like earthbound stars as Emma and Ethan stood in silence on the rooftop garden. A gentle breeze carried the faint scent of cherry blossoms, reminding them both of that fateful day just weeks ago. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," Emma finally said, her fingers tracing patterns on the railing. "About what love really means, about trust and forgiveness, about who we are beneath all our masks." Ethan turned to face her fully. "And what have you concluded?" "That love isn't about perfection," she met his gaze steadily. "It's about acceptance, not just of the good parts, but of the flaws, the mistakes, the human mess of it all." "I made a terrible mistake," Ethan acknowledged, his voice rough with emotion. "But everything I felt, everything I still feel for you, that's the truest thing in my life." Emma moved closer, close enough to see the tears gathering in his eyes. "You know what hurts the most? Not the lie about the wheelchair. It's that you didn't trust me enough to love you for yourself. I know, he whispered. I've spent my whole life watching people love my money, my status, never me. It twisted something inside me, made me doubt that real love was possible. Until I met you. But you still didn't trust it, Emma pointed out. You still had to test it. Yes, and in trying to ensure your love was real, I nearly destroyed it. He reached for her hand, hesitating just before touching it. I would give anything to go back and do it differently. To have met you as myself, no tests, no lies. Emma looked down at his outstretched hand, remembering all the times those same fingers had entwined with hers, all the tender moments they'd shared. We can't go back, she said softly. But maybe we can go forward. His head snapped up, hope blazing in his eyes. What are you saying? I'm saying that I fell in love with your soul, Ethan. Your passion for helping others, your gentle heart, your terrible jokes that somehow still make me laugh. The wheelchair didn't make me love you, and its absence doesn't make me love you less. But the lie was wrong, she finished firmly. And it will take time to rebuild that trust. But if you're willing to try, really try, with complete honesty this time, then so am I. Ethan's hand trembled as he finally took hers. I promise you, Emma Tucker, no more lies. No more tests. Just me, exactly as I am, loving you with everything I have. She squeezed his hand. That's all I ever wanted. They turned to face the city together, their joined hands abridged between past and future. After a moment, Emma chuckled softly. What's funny? Ethan asked. I was just thinking, we're going to have to plan another wedding. And this time, you're walking down that aisle on your own 2 feet. Actually, he smiled, pulling her closer, I was thinking we could do something smaller. Just us, our closest family and friends, right here on this rooftop where it all began. Emma looked around at the garden, imagining it transformed with twinkling lights and flowers. Perfect. But Ethan? Yes? This time, no surprises at the altar. He laughed, the sound full of joy and relief. I promise, though I do have one small confession. She tensed slightly. What? I really am terrible at dancing. That wasn't part of the act. Emma burst out laughing, the sound echoing across the rooftop like music, and as Ethan pulled her into his arms, spinning her under the stars, they both knew that this raw, honest, imperfect love was better than any fairy tale they could have written. 3 months later, they did marry on that rooftop. Their vows spoke not just of love, but of truth, acceptance, and the courage to be vulnerable. And when they kissed as husband and wife, the applause from their guests wasn't just for their love story. It was for their resilience, their forgiveness, and their determination to build something real from the ashes of pretense. For in the end, love's true face isn't found in grand gestures or perfect facades, but in the quiet choice to see each other fully, flaws and all, and love anyway. Emma and Ethan's story wasn't the fairy tale they'd first imagined, but it was something better. It was real. And that wraps up our story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel. Your support keeps us motivated to create more amazing content. We'd love to hear your thoughts, so drop a comment below. We read and reply to everyone. See you in the next video. Until then, take care and stay safe. Bye for now.